Unit relates to the mean distance between the Sun and the Earth, which is around 150 million kilometers, keeping in mind that our natural home requires 365 days to circle the Sun. Planet 9 takes about 20,000 years, if it truly exists. The puzzling planet world is, therefore, out of reach of our ordinary telescopes most of the time. There is also the reality that Planet 9 is in all likelihood very faint. In this regard, the model estimations of a group from the College of Bern have shown that its inherent radiance is only 0.06. Neptune, on the other hand, has a value of 0.01. Besides, the tiny radiation of Planet 9 could also be mostly in the infrared range. This amounts to nothing other than that its temperature would be around 47 Kelvin or minus 226 degrees Celsius, which would make it just slightly hotter than its astronomical environmental elements. But do these multitude of factors mean that we will always be unable to affirm the presence of Planet 9 beyond question? Well, not really. Since, if the divine body is already closest to its closest point to the Sun, it might have already appeared undetected in the pictures of past sky surveys. But regardless of whether Planet 9 is extremely distant from the Sun, trust it isn't totally to no end. Because then, the planetary bullseye could be hit with the help of a strong telescope, for example, the Vera Rubin Observatory. Yet, a little patience would still be required here, as the reflecting telescope is still under development and won't be placed into operation until March 2025 at the earliest. Anyway, the full truth also includes the fact that the last confirmation of the divine body wouldn't just expand the list of planets in the planetary system but also that of infinite mysteries. The presence of Planet 9 would be dangerous. As indicated by the general view, huge planets are formed where the unique gas and residue cloud provide adequate material. This isn't astonishing because only in these regions is the repository large enough to steadily form larger groups and, finally, whole planets. However, with Planet 9, the matter becomes complicated at exactly this point. With a typical distance of around 700 astronomical units from the Sun, it actually moves far outside the zone in which the early-stage cloud provided adequate material for the formation of giant planets. So, the question is, how could a planet that is only slightly smaller than Neptune end up in such a remote and offbeat orbit at all? In fact, this situation even pushes our current models of planet formation to their limits. Although the same applies to the fact that, according to one recreation, Planet 9 must also be organized in basically the same manner as Neptune. And that is exactly the essence of the matter. How could a divine body develop an outer layer of ice along with a thick gas envelope of helium and hydrogen if it has spent very little time in the gas-rich heart of the early-stage cloud? But if Planet 9, in fact, exists, then it must have somehow come into being. And to explain its formation, analysts highlight three different hypotheses. The first is that Planet 9 originally formed in place and in a standard, almost round orbit in the planetesimal disk. The entry of a nearby star then made it gravitationally captured and finally brought to its present interesting orbit. However, the likelihood of this situation is another matter. All things considered, the original haze of the Sun would have needed to have been significantly bigger and more enduring than currently expected. Besides, the question also arises as to whether Planet 9 wouldn't have been shot all the way out of the planetary system during the heavenly tryst. But who knows? Perhaps stars had a hand in it all. Things considered, perhaps these stars were even the kin of the young star. According to this model, the star group to which our Sun too had a place was destroyed by cosmic tidal forces before our wellspring of heat, and life said farewell to its heavenly family. It might have taken Planet 9 from one of its kin, or in other words, caught it with its gravity. Anyway, the likelihood of a taken planet is only 1%. So, the third and final development hypothesis is currently considered the most promising. According to this hypothesis, Planet 9 was formed in the inner regions of the early-stage cloud, just like Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Gravitational interactions and turbulence eventually made the giant planets be driven into orbits much farther out. As the peripheral agent, Planet 9 was therefore pushed furthest away and finally launched into an offbeat orbit. The key point here, however, is that Planet 9 would probably have been slung totally out of the nearby planetary system, well, unless it was dialed back by the thick gas of the early-stage cloud or a nearby star's passage. And indeed, the discovery of an exoplanet circling its binary star system in an equally extreme orbit has shown that this is very possible. But despite all of the possible models, Planet 9 has so far not progressed past the status of a simply hypothetical planet in the missing individual's case. Yet who can say for sure? Perhaps the James Webb Telescope will soon be able to reveal more insight into the planetary haziness of the nearby planetary system. Furthermore, we'd be happy if you could now put a little more subscription into your click. Go ahead and click approval and subscribe so you never miss another video from us again. Is there a formerly obscure planet in the farthest reaches of the planetary group? An ever-increasing number of space experts presently accept that the baffling Planet 9 is real. And mind you, this is certainly not a dubious surmise but a strong conclusion. The abnormal oddities in the Kuiper Belt literally shout that an enormous heavenly body is hiding here. But that's not all. A group of analysts is now even certain that an unseen planet should sneak at the edge of our home system. But what drove the specialists to this electrifying presumption? Why has Planet 9 still not been officially confirmed, and why is it so complicated to find? Have you ever wondered where comets come from? Well, if so, then you have something in common with the Dutch cosmologist Jan Hendrik Oort. He was not happy with the way that the source of the comets was somewhere out there, so he proposed a bowl-shaped zone at the edge of the planetary system in 1950, which acts as a natural repository for the comet centers. Tragically, the so-called Oort cloud could only make sense of the orbits of long-period comets. However, a certain Gerard Kuiper went onto the scene the next year to explain the origin of their short-period companions. And although the Kuiper Belt is now firmly established as a key part of cosmology, it would take an additional 40 years before its genuine presence was officially confirmed in detail. We are dealing with a ring-shaped structure of cold debris that extends right beyond the orbits of Neptune and Pluto and which also, alongside comets, contains cold lumps and small planets. Yet, beyond that, and this is the intriguing part, the Kuiper Belt has been suspected for quite a while to literally be hiding something bigger, a giant planet that has effectively evaded our natural exploration to date. But what is this thrilling supposition based on? And how plausible is it that we've essentially neglected a fully mature planet for ages? Well, it's not that unreasonable. As mentioned, the planetary mystery would lie far beyond the orbits of Neptune and Pluto and hence far away from us, making it seemingly invisible even to the most powerful telescopes ever made. Luckily, however, direct observation isn't the only tool at the disposal of specialists as they continue their search for a planet. And if there's anyone who knows how to break the puzzle of the Kuiper Belt, it's Michael Brown, the American astronomer who has been dedicating himself to uncovering the cold worlds at the edge of our home system for many years now. He named the largest of these worlds Eris, but he could have just as easily called it Pluto's executioner. In fact, the discovery of the dwarf planet contributed significantly to Pluto's removal from the list of official planets in 2006. And while the planetary removal still causes shock in certain circles to this day, Brown continues to look back on his definitive find with a mix of humor and pride. On X, he even calls himself Pluto's executioner in the search for Planet 9. 2006 was not only the extended year of Pluto's farewell, it was also the year in which the discovery of the so-called far-off, isolated objects set a much larger cosmic stage. The objects, also discovered by Brown, actually formed the foundation of a research study that led to a groundbreaking result. Yes, a totally unknown planet could indeed be hiding in the distant realms of the Kuiper Belt. Specifically, Brown, alongside his colleague Konstantin Batygin, investigated the question of what the peculiar orbits of those weird objects were all about. In fact, follow-up studies had shown that 6 of them described elliptical orbits that focused in the same direction, which seemed all the more confusing considering that the objects were actually moving at different rates, and their orbits weren't the same size. But the general orbital tendencies appeared to be no less puzzling. After all, the orbits of each of these 6 celestial bodies deviate by about 30 degrees from the orbital plane of the other planets and objects in the solar system. So, could it be just a surprising coincidence? Well, Brown answered this question with an emphatic no right from the beginning. In fact, he even estimated the probability at 0.7%. He thought the idea was out of the question, but it was not initially the foreboding Planet 9 that was considered responsible for this phenomenon. Initially, astronomers suggested that the gravitational effect of several massive objects, such as a group of dwarf planets, was to blame for this. Ultimately, however, this hypothesis had to be discarded just as quickly as it had arisen, because for such a scenario, the Kuiper belt would have to be several times larger than it actually is. Thus, the mystery had to be solved from another angle. After a few simulations, Brown and Badigian reached the astonishing conclusion that all of the observed irregularities could be explained by the presence of a planet about the size of Neptune. To do this, its orbit would have to be tilted 180 degrees from that of the other planets and Kuiper belt objects. And indeed, the astronomer duo realized in the time that followed that more and more observations matched the presence of such a planet. Among other things, this could be used to explain the unusual orbits of the trans-Neptunian object Sedna and another large celestial body with no gaps. But does that truly settle the matter? Why haven't we found Planet 9? According to experts, models suggest Planet 9 weighs somewhere between 9 and 10 Earth masses and orbits the Sun at a distance of 400 to 1,500 astronomical units. To put this in context, 1 astronomical unit